And joining us on the phone is somebody who's been following St. Joe's for a while. This is Matt Gifford, contributor for Hawk Hill Hardwood, a 247sports.com site, and give us more insight as to who Taylor is and how he might fit in for the Aggies. Matt, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for having me on. This is my first radio spot with a station in Utah, so this is cool.
Well, we'll hope to not jade you too much and ruin your experience. But anyway, this is kind of exciting news, maybe a little bit unexpected to see somebody from the A-10 consider Logan as a destination. But for a lot of people, they have to remember that this coaching staff at Utah State spent time at Maryland-Baltimore County, and this coaching staff has a lot of experience on that East Coast. So this isn't a big of a surprise to get somebody like this here. But we're still kind of wondering, who is Taylor Funk, and what has he done for St. Joe's? I know it's kind of a big open-ended question, but how would you describe how he plays?
It's a good one. Yeah, so Taylor is a guy that obviously he spent a while at St. Joe's, and I actually got to start covering him still when he was in high school. So the first time I saw Taylor Funk play basketball was probably like the June of his junior year of high school. So we're going back like 6 years now. And at the time, like you kind of look at him and say he's tall, but like really nothing else about him screamed basketball player. His body type wasn't really great at that point. He didn't look to be in particularly great shape, and that's something that even like his freshman year at St. Joe's, which he had a tremendous freshman year at St. Joe's, like one of the best three-point shooting seasons that a freshman ever had at St. Joe's. In fact, I think he set the record, which the following year was broken by Charlie Brown Jr., who now is in the NBA. So he can really shoot. And his freshman year at St. Joe's, that's essentially what Taylor was, kind of like a pick-and-pop four guy. Wasn't going to be the greatest rebounder, wasn't going to be the greatest defender as a freshman. But to Taylor's credit, he battled through injuries at St. Joe's. But despite that, he really improved his body a lot. Normally, right, like when you're talking about a kid getting used to college from high school, you want to hear them talk about putting on weight. Like I'm sure when you guys talk about incoming players, it's normally like once they get strength, this is what they could become.
Right.
With Taylor, it's been quite different. It's been like when he loses some weight, what can he become? And he really now is a thin, pretty mobile, athletic enough guy that can run the floor and really can shoot the ball a lot. So, I know that's an overused term, but to give the people that are listening out in Utah or wherever else a little bit of context, I've been doing this a while, covering St. Joe's, and I think Taylor is probably, in my 12 years that I've been doing it like this, probably the second best shooter that I've covered, with the other being Langston Galloway, who played a number of years in the NBA, like 5 or 6 years in the NBA. So that is close to where Taylor is as a shooter. He's essentially an NBA shooter at 6'8", 6'9".
I want to ask you about the elite schools that were going after Taylor. I mean, it's quite the list, Matt. And I was wondering, do you know what may have attracted him to even look at Utah State, nonetheless even come to Utah State?
That is a wonderful question. So I've covered Taylor for a while. I've gotten to know Taylor over the years a little bit. And he's an extremely humble, extremely hardworking guy. I would say one thing about him that made this decision surprising is that Taylor grew up about an hour from St. Joe's. Taylor was homeschooled. So he was a homeschooled kid who then proceeded to go to college. For the very few people listening that are going to know this area at all, he's from Lancaster, which is about 45 minutes, an hour outside of Philadelphia. His parents were at, unless I missed one, every single game that he played at St. Joe's. They were at games where he didn't play because he was hurt. So when that news popped the other afternoon, I'm not going to lie, I did a little bit of a double take and went, oh, like Utah, that's not necessarily what I expected from a distance standpoint. But the more that I thought about it, and like the style, the little bit that I know, and honestly, I've done a lot of this research since the commitment. I can see how that conference and how that school would have an appeal to Taylor, and I also could see, like, could I have seen him at a school like, I don't know, there were like Big Ten schools looking at him. Could I have seen him in that conference as a specialist? I could. But I don't know if that's what he wanted. And again, I'm not pretending to speak as if I've spoken with him since then. But I mean, I could see him as someone that would have a little bit of an adjustment going from playing 35 to 40 minutes a night down to like 15, which I'm assuming with his decision for Utah State and his discussions with the coaching staff, that's not what he's coming out there to do. Not to come out there to play 15 minutes a night, but to, at the minimum, like, compete for a starting role and play a significant role out there for the Aggies.
I think one of the big questions a lot of us have had, without being able to see a lot of tape on him just yet, is, he looks like he's a shooter, a guy that can step out and shoot, got a good stroke, but how much does he mix it up in the paint? Is he okay with contact, or does he rather draw his opponents out of the paint because of his shooting ability?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag with Taylor. So his greatest strength is his shooting. He will rebound. Like, he's not adverse to contact. I know there'll be the stereotype of a 6'8", 6'9", stretch 4 that he does not want contact. I would not say that. I would not ever attempt to put a label on him as being soft or shying away from contact at all. Like, there were games he had at St. Joe's just this past year against good A-10 competition where he had double-digit rebounds. Like, he'll rebound the ball. He'll go in there. He'll mix it up. He would prefer to shoot. He's an outstanding free throw shooter when he gets to the line. I would say, obviously, what you guys are going to see is tape, and all that tape is going to be him just knocking down threes, because that's what he does. He's not going to be a guy that's going to necessarily, like, operate in the post offensively at all. I've been watching him for years and years and years and could probably single out his post-ups. He's not going to be a guy that's going to do that. Defensively, in the A-10, he's had to play the 5, so he's a guy that has defended A-10 5-men and done a pretty good job at it. He's gotten a lot better defensively as he's gotten older and wiser. I definitely would say that rebounding, he'll hold up there. Shooting will hold up there. I really, really like Taylor's game a lot. One thing that I think probably from that higher level interest on the transfer market was the holdout is he's not a guy that's going to really do anything off the bounce. He'll score off the offensive glass. He'll shoot. He'll get to the line, but he's not really a guy that's going to, like, shot fake from 3 and then drive past somebody. He laterally, his quickness is not a strength, and his ball skills are not a strength. Like, they're okay, but he's not a guy that's going to be, like, blowing by people off the dribble.
How does Ryan Odom use him, you think?
So I don't know a ton about what Utah State's roster looks like for next year. I will say that he is much, much better as a 4 than a 5. I would also say that you're not going to want him defending wings. Just as I kind of referred to a moment ago, that lateral quickness of his defensively is a bit of a liability. He's tough, and he will defend, but I've watched him guard wings in the A-10 and struggle with guys getting around him. So I think that he will be used probably by Ryan Odom the best as just like a stretch 4. So he's a guy that'll run. He's a guy that'll rebound. He's a guy that will, have a green light. His game this past year against Georgetown, and yeah, I know it's not Georgetown that when you hear Georgetown you think of, but I might be off here, but he was something like 8 for 9 or 9 for 10 or something like that from 3 in that game, and I watched that from my sofa, And I mean, it was up there as one of the better shooting displays I've seen. I mean, he doesn't need much time at all to get his shot up, and at 6'8" plus, he doesn't really struggle getting that shot up over defenders either. So I think Ryan Odom would want to use him as someone that can pull a big man away from the basket. I think he'd want to use him as someone that can get hot. I will say Taylor is a streaky shooter, and toward the end of the year this year, he had some injury things, and that's another thing here. He's had a couple little things over the years, but he when he's on, I'll tell you, and you'll see these games next year. You'll see games next year, I promise you, where he's going to go 6 for 8 or 7 for 10 or something like that from three if Ryan Odom gives him that kind of volume.
A10 basketball generally, just give us an idea. I mean, there's some high-level basketball being played there. I mean, the Bonnies, Davidson, Dayton. I mean, I'm looking at, 6 teams at 22 wins or more at the top level?
Yeah, that's a good conference.
Yeah,
even in a down year, it's a good conference. And this was a down year for the A10, but it was still a year that saw Richmond, and put it this way, St. Joe's won at Richmond by 30-some points this year, and St. Joe's wasn't good this year. So St. Joe's won at Richmond by 37 or something, 27, something crazy. And then Richmond went on to make the tournament and beat Iowa. So, wow. I mean, Richmond's consistently very good. I mean, you have VCU and, Dayton beat Kansas and whoever else this year. Kansas in the Final Four. So, it is a good conference. It has years where it's 2 bids. It has years where it's 4 bids. But if you're wondering, listeners, what A10 brand of basketball is going to be, definitely guard and wing heavy. Really, there's a lot of NBA guards right now that came out of the A10 from Bones Highland, who went to VCU, to St. Joe's has, I think, 4 guys in the NBA right now. So, and they're mostly guards and wings. Up front, you're normally talking about rim runners, and not necessarily a ton of. It's not Big Ten basketball. You're not going to be dealing with a ton of post-up. So when Taylor was playing defense in the A10, he was dealing with a lot of switching. He was dealing with a lot of, at times, 6'6" power forwards, but guys that would step out and shoot, guys that were extremely athletic. And then as 5 men, you're dealing with either guys that have stepped down from Power Fives, which St. Joe's had a player just like that this year who came from Vanderbilt to St. Joe's. But it's definitely guard and wing heavy, definitely really, really athletic basketball. And, I've been covering it for 12 years, and I've seen some really, really terrific teams and some really terrific players. And Taylor is one of the more fun players I've watched. With anyone, when you watch him for that long, the weaknesses jump out. But his strengths, his shooting, his willingness to compete. You're getting a good player, and I'm a little surprised, just from a location standpoint, especially, that it happened. So kudos to the staff there for being able to pull that off.
Matt, let me ask you here my final question for you, and this is putting you in a really, really tough spot.
That's
but
okay.
Where do you see, or how do you see Taylor Funk performing this upcoming basketball season, knowing what you know about him, knowing what you know about the Mountain West Conference, and some of the athletes that come out of there? How do you think he handles and does here in the Mountain West Conference this upcoming season?
Yeah, so the Mountain West got 4 bids this year?
Yeah,
I believe,
one
right?
NIT team.
Yeah, so you're talking. It's weird. I would not say that the Mountain West had a really good year this year. I would say, traditionally, at least recent history, the A10 and the Mountain West are relatively similar conferences in terms of kind of being, I think, a little underregarded nationally. I know the A10 really well, and I watch a lot of Big East and a lot of ACC and a lot of Big Ten, and see routinely teams in this conference that can beat those teams. What I've seen of the Mountain West is a conference that's similar. That was a deep and good conference this year. I think, to answer your question, and you didn't put me in a tough spot, it's a good one. I think a lot's going to be up to the coaching staff. So I don't know a ton about Ryan Odom, other than know that he was highly regarded coming from UMBC. I do know that Taylor's a guy that needs to be used a certain way. And I think that that's what Ryan Odom's going to really need to be able to do this year. And it'll be a year, so he'll have a little bit of time here to figure out how to make the puzzle work. Because pretty early on, I think the staff, the players, you'll see exactly what he is. And if he's used the right way, he's a difference maker type of player. At times, I feel like when I've watched him at St. Joe's, he played for 2 coaching staffs. He had injuries. I think there were some ups and downs that weren't entirely on him. I think there were some last year. He was forced to play the 5, which he's not. And then this past year, the team just frankly wasn't all that good, or as good as they expected to be. So I think that if Ryan Odom's able to say, all right, we need to get Taylor Funk 6 to 8 threes a game, and there will be a game where he makes 1 of them, and there'll be a game where he makes 7 of them, but we're just going to continue to get him good looks off like mismatches. He's kind of like a little bit of a mismatch in Ryan Odom's favor. You got to figure out how to use him, kind of cover some of his deficiencies defensively. But I wouldn't. There aren't that many guys at his size that can shoot like he can shoot, and shooting and spacing is so important that if he's able to be used right, I mean, I think that it'll be a really, really good experience for the staff and for Taylor as well.
Matt, final question for me, and I think you've kind of alluded to it, just as some of the changes that were going on with his roster and coaching as well. But last year, the season before, he was a guy averaging 17, 18 points a game, and that declined this season. What is it, because of the position he was playing and had to shift there because of personnel? What was the difference in why his scoring dropped this year compared to last?
So I will be very, very candid and say that the last 8 to 10 games of this year were by far the worst that I've seen him play at St. Joe's. And that when you take that into account, I think that's going to show. Like if you were to look at his scoring from the first half of the year and then the second, he had some pretty decent injury stuff that he fought through. I know there were reports toward the end of the year of like him having to get his foot drained after games, and he obviously wanted to continue playing. But I would say like the last 8 to 10 games of this year, he was a little bit of a shell of himself. I know that none of that was lingering stuff. That's not stuff that's going to be like long term, but he had like a foot thing, and then in the second to the last game of the year, he fractured a finger that put him out 6 to 8 weeks. So that definitely, I think, altered him this year. And I will say, like, if you go back and look, there have been stretches of games that he has missed. He missed most of his, I want to say, sophomore year due to injury. And again, these aren't, like, softness things. Like, he played through some serious pain this year. But I think that injury is a part this year. I think that Taylor and St. Joe's both expected to be better this year. The guard on St. Joe's this year is a guy named Jordan Hall, who left for the NBA draft and is a guy that is projected kind of like mid-second round. He also kind of had some of his numbers go down this year as well. So I think that I wouldn't, like from your standpoint, look at his dip this year and be concerned about that being something moving forward. I think it's the kind of thing a change in scenery could help. I think it's the type of thing that he'd been at St. Joe's for a long time. He'd been at St. Joe's for 5 years. Sometimes toward the end of the time anywhere, you're ready for a change of scenery and it'll help you. And I would expect more of, statistically, like per 36, the Taylor Funk of 2 years ago than this past year.
Interesting. Well, that's a fascinating look as to who this guy is and what he might bring to the table for Utah State coming up next season. And Matt, appreciate your insight. You've been watching this very closely, and appreciate helping us understand a little bit more about who Taylor Funk is and what he could look like for USU.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Absolutely. Happy to join you guys.